Welcome back. Always an honor when we have time to sit down with Richard Manning. Richard is one of the frontline warriors, and I so appreciate him. He's president of the Americans for Limited Government. He's the co-author of a fascinating book called Necessary Noise. Richard's landing page, or website, I should say, is getliberty.org. There's the picture of the cover of the book, and there's the picture of the landing page. And check it out, getliberty.org. Brother Richard, good to see you, friend. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Doing well. Doing well. Hey, within hours, they're going to do the first vote of the reconvening of the the 119th Congress. And the first thing on the agenda is Speaker Johnson. What's going to happen, Coach?
I don't know. It's the fact of the matter is, when two people can decide who gets to be Speaker or not, unless you're inside the minds of every single person, you don't know the answer to it. I'll tell you what should happen is they should rehire Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, as Speaker. And even if some people don't like him, even if some people don't trust him, the damage done by a massive speakers battle that destroys any sense of unity in the House Republicans with an extraordinarily, in fact, almost unprecedented narrow majority would be devastating to the Donald Trump agenda, and would be a slap in the face to those people who voted to have change occur in this Congress.
Yeah, I think most people in common sense wisdom would agree with you there. The president-elect did apparently speak to some Republicans early this morning. He did endorse Speaker Johnson, but apparently Representative Massey's not happy. That's one. I don't know if he picks up a few Democrats. Any idea?
No chance he picks up Democrats, at least not initially. The fact is the Democrats want to leverage this for every bit of power they can get from it. And you would be foolish to be a Democrat and vote for a speaker and not get some significant power in exchange, namely committee chairs, more seats on various committees, maybe split the committees to 50-50. So the cost of having to go across the aisle to create to get a speakership is extremely high, and I would be shocked if Mike Johnson does that, or if he's even able to do that.
All right, so we're down to 218 have to vote for him. Do you think that Mike Johnson, in the shadow of all of the controversy over the continuing resolutions, that maybe he's learned a lesson here and can become a deliverer of the mega agenda and loyal to the president?
You know, I think the challenge that Mike Johnson's had all along is the Republicans don't have a governing majority in the House. They also don't have one in the Senate, for that matter, but that's a different problem. You don't have people who are committed to the same things and accomplishing the same things. Those who are standing up, and many of the biggest problems for Mike Johnson are those who say they didn't cut enough or cut any in the appropriations bills that were passed. And they're not wrong in that, but one of the reasons why they didn't was because many of the conservatives wouldn't vote for a continuing resolution no matter what. And so ultimately you have a choice: shut down the government or pass something. Mike Johnson made the decision, along with a majority of his conference, the Republicans, that they wanted to pass something and be able to then get to March, when Donald Trump and a Republican majority in the House and the Senate can then tackle the spending issues as a majority, and the Democrats in the minority. That was a decision that was made. It was the right decision. They didn't have the votes to do much with the slender control of the House, and as a result, he decided to punt until Donald Trump became president. So Donald Trump then can play a big role in how the last 6 months of the fiscal year, the first 6 months of his presidency, how the money's spent.
So, Richard, if by chance in a half hour they don't elect Speaker Johnson and they get into some kind of a hassle, how does that interrupt the solidifying of the Electoral College?
It's a great question, because they've got, in 3 days, they have the meetings where they actually affirm the Electoral College decisions, and no leadership in the House will certainly throw that into a massive amount of disarray. Not that that's that unusual, but yeah, it has a huge problem. You need to have, presumably, somebody leading the House of Representatives to be able to oversee everything else. And oh, by the way, if you don't have, you've got to have rules. There's a whole series of things that have to occur. And if you have the Republican side fighting amongst one another and reaching across the aisle to try to put together votes for supporting, anything, it gives the Democrats a lot of leverage on affirming the presidency. And there are those on the Democrat side who are determined to block Donald Trump becoming president over really the false allegations brought up regarding January 6th 4 years ago. And it promises to be an ugly scene.
Do you think those who would vote against Speaker Johnson retaining his position can afford to go through an election in 23 months with the president mad at him?
A lot of stuff happens over 23 months, so it's people in politics can't stay mad that long. Yeah. At least they can't stay mad that long and survive. So it is there are dozens, hundreds of deals to be made between then and now. The challenge, of course, is Donald Trump has effectively a 13-month presidency, and from a congressional perspective. Once the Congress goes into a re-election mode, which is generally around January of the next year, a year from now, once they go into re-election mode, what the president wants becomes significantly less important to Congress than what they need to do to get reelected. And it is so the president's power is very, very short term and limited in Congress. And given that this is Donald Trump's second term, and he's not going to be on the ballot again, his power is diminished even more than it was before, or any other president would be. So he's got a very short window to get his legislative agenda done, and not having a functioning House of Representatives to start much of the fiscal agenda, much of the money side of the agenda, not having that in place will delay the Trump presidency and the Trump agenda at a time when they have the absolute most power that they will have. Donald Trump will never have more power than he has right now.
Right.
Okay. January 20 is the apex of Donald Trump's power in Washington, D.C. Every day after that, it diminishes a little bit. Every deal he has to make to get a cabinet secretary through, every time he has to do something to get something done, his power diminishes. He will never be more powerful than January 20th. And the House Republicans need to have their stuff together and be functioning without Donald Trump having to pull a bunch of strings and use a bunch of his power to be able to get it to perform basic functions.
That is well said. That is well said. Yeah, well said, Richard.
I'm going to just, there's one thing that Donald Trump can do that actually accomplishes MAGA agenda, and that is something called Budget Reconciliation Act. That is dependent upon a House of Representatives putting a budget out that then they can say, here's how we want to amend that budget in terms of practical programming to to restructure government. Donald Trump is attempting to restructure Washington, D.C. and how it works. The Budget Reconciliation Act is how to do that, because it only takes 50 votes in the Senate plus the vice president to do it. So you don't need any Democrats in the Senate. That's what's on the line. That has to happen in the first 2.5, 3 months of this presidency. And Donald Trump knows that. Everybody in Washington, D.C. knows that. And it is his one bite at a big bite of an apple to try to get a significant part of his agenda done. It's how Biden got the Inflation Reduction Act done, and it's how Donald Trump will have to get the MAGA agenda done, as much as can be done under the rules that exist and the Senate's willingness to vote for them. But if he doesn't have an operating House, his entire legislative agenda is maybe up in smoke.
Let me switch gears quickly before I take a break. Yesterday it was announced that President Biden's going to get the former January 6th committees all a little bit of a presidential award of citizenship. I don't know what your take is on this, and is that a precursor to a preemptive pardon?
I've given up attempting to read Joe Biden's mind. It's a short read, but I don't even want to go that far. But it is but yeah, I think very, very possibly it is. And it's unseemly. It really is unseemly to sit there and say, oh, here's a committee that destroyed their records because they didn't want the incoming Republican Congress to be able to access their records. Many of those records were actually proof that the allegations against President Trump and those around him were false. So they destroyed the records. They were purely partisan in everything they did. And then to say, oh, well, gee whiz, we're going to give you a presidential award, and oh, we're holding out a pardon potential for you. It just shows that the whole thing was nothing more than political theater, and it had absolutely no basis in the law, and no basis in justice, and no basis in any attempt to do anything but create a partisan environment where Donald Trump could not come back and win election. And ultimately, fortunately, it failed miserably.
Yeah. Getliberty.org is Richard's website. There's a picture of the landing page. Check that out, getliberty.org. Very resourceful. And check out his book, Necessary Noise. I'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Always an honor to have Richard Manning with us, President of Americans for Limited Government. He's also the co-author of a great book called Necessary Noise. There's a picture of the cover of the book. He and Star Parker put this together. It's a great read. And then, of course, he has a very resourceful website, getliberty.org. And there's the picture of the website, getliberty.org. Richard, the opportunity before us right now with this incoming administration to shrink the size of government, clean it up, make it by far more accountable and respectful is a big agenda. And I know there's a lot of things that conditionally would have to fall in place to make it happen. But it appears the spirit of America is ready for this. You agree?
I agree. It's what people voted for it, even though they may not have known they voted for it. The fact of the matter is people have been upset that the federal government's been reaching into their lives in so many different ways over a number of years. I think the transgender agenda, attacking your kids and trying to make it so your parents are disassociate from their own kids' upbringing, from basic decisions in their kids' lives, being pushed by a federal bureaucracy and agenda that is somewhat, I'm just going to say it, it's anti-biblical and it's immoral. And and I think that touched a lot of people because it brought it home. It made an impersonal, faraway federal government. Suddenly they're messing with their kids. And I think that made a big difference. People expect that to end. I also think that they looked at it and they said, you know, the government's become so big, so unwieldy, doesn't respond to me, doesn't seem to be doing anything right, won't protect our borders, can't figure out, you know, we're busy with foreign wars and we've got crime running rampant out here on our own streets that nobody seems to care about. And I think it just kind of, people said enough is enough and they wanted it fixed. And that's what they voted for with Donald Trump. Many things that need to be fixed need to be fixed at the state and local level, not the federal level. But the federal level is kind of the guidepost for where every other government agency kind of goes. So there's a real opportunity here for the Republicans and Democrats to work together to try to create an America that people can recognize again, and one that respects liberties, one that doesn't engage in censorship of thought, one that actually stands for as a beacon for freedom, and not a government that seems to close their eyes and shut their whole minds off to the concept of individual liberties as written in the Constitution. So it's so yeah, that's what people voted for. It's what we have today, a new Congress. It's coming in, and that's what they were elected to do by thin majorities, mind you. But that's what they were elected to do, and I hope that they will keep their eye on the ball and do it, because America doesn't have time for little fractious fights between, like a high school election fight. They don't have time for that. We have a country to save, and these congressmen have been elected to save it, and I hope they're able to start the job on day 1, January 3, today.
I thank you. I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question, but it appears to me personally, and I know where you are on this too, but it appears to me that God has given us a new chance here. And I guess we could ask the question why. I did say something the other day that kind of shocked myself. I said, you know, in the end, I kind of thank God for the Biden administration, because I don't think we understood how close we were to the edge. And a second Trump administration would have been softer than the one that we're getting now. But something drastic has to change. And it may have taken this last 4 years for us to realize how bad it really was. Is that stretching it too far?
I think it's exactly true. Unfortunately, you know, some of the things the Biden administration has put in place are going to be extremely difficult to dislodge. But I think the Trump administration coming in is much more wise and much more wary of what the federal government can do, and is pretty determined to unwind it. And because, quite honestly, the Donald Trump who lost the election under whatever circumstances you want to call them in 2020 is not the same Donald Trump who then went through massive persecution and lawfare for the last 4 years and experienced the full power of the federal government combined with state and local governments attempting to destroy him in every possible way, simply because he stood up and said no to the political establishment. And that's we've got a different Donald Trump coming in than the idealistic Donald Trump in 2017, who thought he could, you know, he was the boss, he was going to say something and people do it. He's much more sophisticated now, and quite honestly, he's a little irritated. And we need somebody who's not afraid to knock heads and say, no, we're going to get stuff done to restore freedom in this country. And it's the great hope is that because he has had the experiences, because he has had an encounter with God through a assassin's bullet in Pennsylvania, and knows that and acknowledges that. I think we've got a different Donald Trump coming in, and I think we've got a better Donald Trump coming in, and I think he'll have a better set of hands around him to try to accomplish the mission that's been set before him. And lastly and finally, folks, it is essential that we continue to pray to keep him on track, to keep him focused on why he was put there, because the truth of the matter is there's a zillion things pulling at people's attention every single day, and the question is he going to stay on track that he's been put on, or is he going to be derailed? And trust me, every single one of us is trying to stay on track with a focus on the cross, understand how you can get distracted and find yourself off in the weeds and confused pretty darn easily. Well, Donald Trump's going to have a billion distractions and trying to derail him from the tasks ahead that I believe God has anointed him to do. And that is to restore America. So yeah, pray, not just for him, but for those around him.
Well said, Richard. Then as we entered this new year, we entered with a tragic thing there in New Orleans, and I don't know if the dots will be connected between there and Las Vegas. There seems to be a lot of coincidences here, but they haven't connected those dots yet. But it does say something. It does say something not only about the problem at the border, but the problem in the Middle East and ultimately Iran. What's your take?
Yeah, we've allowed a lot of people who don't like us into the country. A, B, we have indoctrination centers around the country, and that are basically taking people out of prison and some out of the military, to attempting to indoctrinate them into a hate agenda. And it is and free countries have problems that unfree countries don't have. And when you combine a lot of the elements that we've combined in terms of willingness to accept people from other cultures who don't go through our process for coming into the country, combined with, you got 330 million people with different points of view about things. You've got a powder keg that can go off at any time. I think that obviously the Las Vegas attack and the New Orleans attack were tied together. There are too many. I don't believe in coincidences, but ultimately the question is, how are we going to be able to get our law enforcement, our federal law enforcement, back focused on stopping these kind of terrorist attacks and less as babysitters of people who are trying to keep flooding our borders. And it just goes to show that Donald Trump's mission of getting the worst out of our country first is essential, so we can focus on those who are here legally and the like, and making certain that our laws are followed and that we don't have more terrorist attacks.
All right, one other quick question before I run out of time. The president-elect has announced that by 2 o'clock on January 20th, his administration will be pretty effective, indicating that there'll be a bunch of EOs, executive orders coming out. Do you have any idea what they may be?
I have some ideas of what I think they'll be. I can tell you that in 2017, I was on the transition team for the Labor Department, and across the transition, we had hundreds of executive orders ready to go, hundreds of various pardons, various whole broad scape of things that were all set to go. And the decision was made in January 2017 to not do any of that stuff and wait until the Trump White House was in place and the like, even though everything that was written had been approved by President Trump at the time. And so very little of it actually happened in real time. The objective was to do a shock and awe campaign and make it so there was so much stuff that was being done that the left couldn't respond to all of it, and you'd get a lot done in a short period of time, minimum amount of chaff in the sky taking it down. I hope they pursue that strategy this time. It was the right strategy in 2017, didn't get implemented, even though it was ready to go. And I suspect that what we're going to see most dramatically for DC is a return to work order that says every federal employee has to come to work and can't work from home. And that's going to have real impact, because many of the federal employees that work in DC are working from home from places like South Carolina and collecting DC wages in South Carolina, kind of against the law. And and so they're going to be saying, no, you have to be in the office in DC. And the first step of draining the swamp in the Musk plan is to force people to quit because they don't want to come to work. And so we'll see how that turns out. But that will be the first thing that you'll hear the most yelling about, and because it's going to affect probably 1 million people, and they're not going to be happy.
Richard, it's always an honor to have you, friend. What's ahead for you? What are you looking forward to? What's 2025 saying to Richard Manning?
Right now I'm focused on family. I've got a little family challenge with my disease, and I just can tell you, everybody out there who sat in a hospital in Christmas, that God is with you. God will touch you. God is faithful. He is true.
Amen.
No matter what the outcome is, just know that God is God. He's in control, and just give yourself up to him. And that's what my goal is, 2025.
Thank you, brother. Prayers with you. Thoughts? Let's stay connected. Thank you for what you do. GetLiberty.org is the website. Check out the book, Necessary Noise. Check that out. But GetLiberty.org, very resourceful. Go there and support Richard. Thank you, buddy. God bless you, pal.
God bless you. Take care. Bye.
Okay.